So this is a project that I already started. This is just pinch building, and what I'm going to do now is just show you how to get kind of a smoother surface. So just like that on this side. So what you do is you take your serrated edge tool and you just drag it through the clay. Put a little bend in it if you're trying to get a rounded surface. And then the trick is to work that surface in multiple directions. What this does is the teeth plow through the clay and kind of redistribute the clay so that you get a more consistent surface. And then you use the tool without teeth on it. And you do kind of the same thing you were doing. Drag it across the clay. And that will leave you with a really slick surface. So, why do we do this? Well, you do this so that you have a nice clean surface to work with that's nice and consistent. If you were to just start working the surface of this tool without using the serrated edge tool first, you're going to see kind of some spots that you're missing, some waviness to it. It's not going to look as good as when you start with this tool, okay? So then this creates a surface that I can add texture to. If I want it to be smooth, I'd leave it alone. If I want it to have some kind of texture, I would start working, figuring out what I want in the surface. There's a million things you can do. You know, if I want this to look like it's hairy or something, I can just use my needle tool and just do a bunch of little marks all over like this. And it takes a long time, but that's what you do to get kind of the texture you want. And you just keep working it like that. You know, if you want it to look like really short hair, maybe it's just poking it with the tip of the tool, kind of like a buzz cut kind of look, little stubble. You know, if you want something that looks maybe longer hair, if you're doing hair at all, you know, maybe you use a tool with a longer tip on it like that. You do something more like that. All right, so the example I often use is if you're making an apple has a really smooth surface to it, so it needs to have a smooth surface. If you're making a gorilla has a really hairy surface to it, so you have to figure out what looks right. You know, I would probably do something like that. If you're building a tree, what kind of surface does a tree have? Well, generally trees have bark, and bark is usually kind of rough, depending on the tree. So you'd want the surface to look like that. If you're making a rock, maybe you smooth down the surface and then you go find a rock that has the texture on it that you like, and you just roll that rock around on the surface and create a rock-like texture. There's a lot of things that you can do, but you've got to figure out what the texture should be, and the texture should match up with the surface of the clay, or with the form that you're making. Right? If you know, like I said, if you're making an apple, give it an apple texture. If you're making something that looks like a rock, it should have a rock texture. It needs to make sense to the form that you're creating. Okay? All right.